My name is Timo Stollenwerk. I'm a Plone core developer and founder of KitConcept, the Plone solution provider from Germany, Bonn. I'm member of a few Plone teams, the framework team, the release team, and the testing and continuous integration team. And I think Eric laid out the general idea of like the Plone REST API, right? Plone server and Plone client is the talk you will hear afterwards, and I will try to focus on like the connection between all of those components and try to give you an idea what Plone REST API looks like. Plone REST API is a RESTful hypermedia API for Plone. I won't go too much into detail because I gave a talk about that last year at the conference, and we don't have much time. So I will leave it at that. So for me, everything like started around like 3 years ago. My team was building an app on top of Plone, and we run into a few problems, like general scalability problems, but our main problem was actually that our page loads were too slow. So we had an application where the user could like browse through a lot of content, search content, and it was just not quick enough, right? Also, another problem was the project was growing, so and it was supposed to have like a rich user interface, and like the amount of jQuery code and JavaScript code that we had was just like killing us, right? So we couldn't really handle the complexity any longer. And we also needed like some good like UI building blocks that we could reuse, like something like jQuery UI or whatever you used like back then maybe. So I was the project lead back then, and I was starting to look around for like different solutions that we had. And I looked into what I would call like the modern web, or what we now call like the modern web. Back then we choose to go with Angular. React was also there already, but it was a bit like the new kid on the block, so we went with Angular because it seemed back then a bit more mature. In the end, it was quite like a good decision because we were able to like really fix all the problems that I described with that. Our team was able to pick up that rather quickly. And we built a fast, scalable application with real-time functionality. We had all the building blocks. So if you choose Angular or React, you usually have like also the UI building blocks. So you can just choose from that. You don't have to start from the scratch, right? So it's a framework. So you have all kinds of nice things that you can reuse that make your life easier. Since then, like a lot of things happened in the JavaScript community. And we seen like Angular has a new Angular had a new successor, which is called Angular 2, right? React matured. We saw frameworks like React Native, for instance, or NativeScript that allow you to use JavaScript to create native applications. Electron that allows you to create like desktop applications with all that kind of functionality. So there's a lot of things going on. So that really might sound too good to be true to use, and now I will like talk about the downside. It's all like JavaScript, right? I mean, I have to admit that I really like Python, right? I mean, I like the design decisions. I like coding in Python, right? It's really great, and to be honest, JavaScript is also like I always miss the elegancy in like Python when I do JavaScript. But bottom line is that JavaScript is a reality, and all the innovation right now happens like in the JavaScript world, right? It has like the main advantage that it runs on all the browsers, right? So that's the thing. So if you want like the candy, you need to like deal with JavaScript. You can like it or you don't. But my honest opinion is that if you're a web developer in 2016 and you don't like know any of those advanced like JavaScript frameworks, that will become even more complicated the more time it like will take, right? So we have a problem here. We have like a JavaScript community that goes at a real like fast pace, right? I mean, I just was offline 2 days on Twitter, and then it turned out that there was a new JavaScript package manager, right, that I totally missed. And those things happen, right? But they happen for a reason, because like it's always like an improvement, right? But for us, for the Plone community, that's a huge problem, because we have usually like large deployments, and Plone works usually for organizations that are like rather big and that plan long in advance, like, right? Like, for instance, universities. I mean, I know universities that are still on Plone 3, and they plan to go on Plone 4 or 5, like, in the next, like, 5 years or whatever, right? So that's the pace they go, and it's really important. Stability is really important for them, right? Security is really important. Like, they have content-centric applications, so all the stuff that Plone is really good at, right? And on the other hand, we have all this nice, really fast-going JavaScript world, and we have to get the two together, right? We want to have the best of, like, both worlds, ideally. So how do we do that? How do we scope with that problem? Eric already used the term like headless CMS. The basic idea is really that you have it like decoupled, that you decouple your front end from your back end, right? More and more functionality goes into like the browser. Less goes on the server. What Ramon basically explained to you, right? So we have like, we can reduce stuff on the server. We could get rid of all like the browser views and all that kind of stuff and do that on the front end. But if we do that, we need some kind of API, right? So that the front end can talk to the back end. A lot of other, I mean, in the market, like all other CMSs or basically all web-based like frameworks or whatever, have this problem right now, right? They developed like over a long time, over a long period, and now there's this like JavaScript stuff, and they want to adapt that, right? So other content management systems face the same problem, and they're also like working on that. WordPress, for instance, has a React-based client, right? That is production ready, as far as I can tell. Drupal also announced at the Angular conference that they're going to build an Angular 2 front end on top of Drupal, and we will have another talk at the Plone conference about this headless CMS. So that's the basic idea. And the implementation of this headless CMS, or this requirement, is, as Ramon and also Eric told you already, is Plone REST API, right? That's our bridge between Plone and the modern web. It will allow you, or it already allows you, to use any modern JavaScript framework that you might want to use, right? We are not opinionated in that. I know a lot of people are talking about like those JavaScript framework fights, right? That we have like people that say, hey, I want React, the other ones say Angular 2, whatever. I must admit, I did not experience that really in the community. Most people are really open, and most people that do JavaScript these days use like different frameworks for different use cases, right? So we did not want to be like opinionated in any way, and you can use Plone REST API with any framework that you want, and that's an important asset, right? Because it could be that like maybe next month there's React 2 or whatever, right? And we might want to switch. So Plone REST API really like decouples this front end from the back end and allows us to use those modern JavaScript solutions today. In addition to that you can use it today, we have this long-term vision that Ramon already presented to you, right, with Plone Server. So that's our long-term plan. So I will go a bit through the API. I promise I will not show you like any JSON, anything, right? So I will try to be not boring, even though I had to pick the most boring talk, I guess. I mean, from the topic, I mean, talking about APIs. So how do you work with Plone REST API, right? HTTP and REST, which is basically like the implementation of the ideas of HTTP, has already assets to do that. It's called like content negotiation, right? That's what happens if you access a page with your browser, right? The browser sends an accept header to the server and says, hey, I would like to have text HTML, and then the server replies and says, here's your HTML, right? So that works with other formats as well. Since Plone REST API is right now JSON-based, because this is what all the JavaScript frameworks use these days, but it could work with XML as well, right? So this is how we do it. The client asks, hey, give me a page, give me a URL, a resource, and I will accept like application JSON, right? That's the HTTP header that the client sends, your JavaScript framework, Angular, React, whatever you like, and the server replies with content in the body and a content type header that says application JSON. So you will get JSON back, right? Excuse me if I don't show you that JSON, but it will be there, right? So that works for content in general. Then you might want to authenticate to Plone, right? Because it could be that you write a front-end server, a client that needs you to authenticate, right? Basic authentication and pass and everything, that still works in Plone, right? So you can use just basic authentication like you're used to, but you can also use JWT, JSON Web Tokens, which is a more modern way of authenticating. So the basic idea is you do a post request on this login URL, and in the body you provide username and password, and then basic authentication. With basic authentication, you have to do that over and over again, and with JWT, it will provide you with a token that you can keep, right? So it's a bit nicer than that. Then the Plone is a content-centric application, right? So you might want to access content through the Plone REST API. That's our core the core idea, right? So what we implemented is like the idea is to have a browsable API or a hypermedia API, right? I won't go too much into detail because I did that like last year already. But the idea is basically that you have, oh, I have JSON here. Sorry. So you have a JSON document. Say you access, you do a GET request on a Plone site, right? You see that localhost 8080 Plone, and you get a list of like all items that are inside that Plone portal, right? Right now there's only one, but you get an ID back, which is basically the URL of that page. So you have the front page, you have a document type and a description and a title. And if you would click on the add ID link, you could follow that and browse the URL, right? I mean, that's basically the idea of hypermedia, that you have connected resources or documents that you can browse. This, of course, only works for GET, right? Just browsing. You can't interact really with the system. So here's a quick demo of the browsing. Here we have a Plone site, a Plone 5 site with 2 pages and the default content, right? And I built a really that simple Angular application on top of that. So here you see you have two pages. This is the Angular app. It's really like minimal. You see that you have just a navigation, and you see that, but you can see that the page loads a lot faster than in the Plone app, right? I mean, it's of course unfair because it's a really minimal application, but the only thing that you transfer is the JSON, right? So it's a lot faster to load, and you don't load the entire page, but only like the content, right? And here you see I changed the page 1, right? And then it reflects on the Angular app. So that's just like an app to browse. I will provide that example so you can use it as a starting point, but it's really far from anything that Plone client does, right? What Eric will show you later. Then you want to do more than just browsing, right? You want to interact with the content, and the term that is used in that is crud. Crud means that you have 4 operations on your content that you might want to do. That's create, read, update, and delete, and that maps to the to HTTP verbs, and the HTTP verbs are post, get, put, and delete. So if you want to create a new document, you do a post request on a folder with the information about like the title and stuff like that. If you want to access that object that you just created, you do a GET request on that URL. If you want to update it, you do a PUT request or a patch request. And if you want to delete it, you do an HTTP delete request. So that's basically the CRUD operation. If you want to create, you usually don't, I mean, this is like the HTTP level, right? If you create a user application, you don't want to interact on that level, right? You want to provide a form for users that they can use, and you want to auto-generate this form. For that, you need some kind of schema in your front end so that the front end knows how to show you, say, a date field or something, right? And for that, we're using a JSON schema, and Plone REST API provides a types endpoint that gives you a schema for any content type in Plone. And you can use that JSON schema information to render a form. And Eric Berhold created a Angular 2 schema form application for Angular 2, but there's also one for React that allows you to create forms out of this JSON schema, right? So the idea is basically that you have this endpoint, and you just ask that endpoint for the schema, but you can also embed that schema in a GET request, for instance, if you want to render a form. So I think I might want to, I mean, yeah, I will show it really quickly. So here's an unthemed example of this Angular 2 schema form. So you see that all the widgets are there. You have a date widget. You have a master like slave widgets and all the bells and whistles that you would expect. Same is true for like the React schema form, for instance, right? So that's the cool thing actually about like those JavaScript frameworks. A lot of people build stuff for you that you can just reuse, right? And that's also used in Plone Server, which Eric will show you shortly. Another thing that Plone REST API, what Plone REST API provides you is what we call components. Components are basically just objects or snippets on your page, right? Think of like, for instance, the navigation or the breadcrumbs or other parts, right, that you need to render a page. So far we have a navigation endpoint that just gives you the navigation that allows you to show like the portal navigation and the or what we have right now as navigation portlet and the navigation bar, breadcrumbs. Those are basically just like really trivial endpoints that you just query and then you can get that information. We have ways to deal with workflow. So you can, for instance, you can, of course, the workflow information is embedded if you do a GET request on a content object, but you can also change the workflow status of an object by posting to the URL. Like say you want to publish the front page, then you use that URL to publish that. We have ways to query the registry. So we have a registry endpoint for Plone registry. So you can do a GET request to get a setting and to update a setting. Then we have a users endpoint that allows you basically the CRUD operations for users. So you can create a user, you can retrieve a user, you can update a user, and you can delete a user. That's working. We're using that in production actually. Some things are missing at the user's endpoint, things like missing password reset and all that kind of stuff. That's additional functionality that we haven't implemented yet, but the basics are there. We also expose a search endpoint. Search is like kind of a really complicated topic because we not only have like we don't only have to expose like the Z catalog functionality, but we also want to be able to use Solr and Elasticsearch, and Solr has like 2 different JSON APIs and Elasticsearch as well, right? And they have really different ideas of how to do things, right? Also internally, even though they both use Lucene. So if we want to create a unified search API, I think that's just impossible, right? Because like Solr and Elasticsearch didn't get their APIs right in the first place, and to unify them would be just impossible, right? So we need to find a way to deal with that. But Lucas Graf created a like basic search UI that basically just does the same that Plone currently does, and you can internally use Elasticsearch or Solr already if you just want to provide the basic search functionality. And luckily, we had a client that paid us to create a React-based user interface for this endpoint. So this is an example of collective Solr together with Plone REST API. And I will quickly demo you what you can do. So you basically do a query, and you see immediately that you don't need any autocomplete there, right? Because the backend Solr or Elasticsearch, they're so fast in responding to queries that autocomplete does not really makes much sense there, right? So that's really quick. Like all the default functionality works, so you can sort and also filter the results. For an internal project, we build a search interface that is much more sophisticated with facets and all that kind of stuff that you want. But that's really fast, and that's really nice, and that's what you can do if you have a fast backend that can like Solr or Elasticsearch. And that's not the only thing. You also need like a fast front-end framework like React or Angular, right? And for that we use React because React is like a small library, and it's easy to use, and it was a good use case for that, right? Even though we are using Angular 2 in other projects, right? So it's really not that like framework war that people talk about. Yeah, by the way, like collective Solr is already released, so we have an alpha release Tom gave a training yesterday, I think, about collective Solar, so that's ready to be used in Plone 5 and Plone 4. So yeah, that's a really nice thing. So I gave you a first impression about like the basic functionality of Plone REST API. The current status is we actually have like 2 packages. I mean, it's like in the Plone community, I think we're just not able to create one thing in one package, right? So we created 2 packages, Plone.rest and Plone.rest API. Plone REST was basically almost created exclusively by Ramon. And it allows you to use basically the HTTP verbs on top of Plone, right? And Plone REST API gives you all those endpoints. Plone.rest is already in beta phase. We had 6 releases, and I think it's pretty much stable. So you can go ahead and use it right away, right? If you want to create your own endpoints, and you're also free to create your own like API. But I would recommend to go with Plone REST API because there you already have like the basic building blocks, right? That you might want to use, and you can use your own. And Plone REST API is still in the alpha phase. We made 5 releases yet. The API will be subject to change most likely because we haven't got all the things right. All right, there are still many things that we need to discuss and that we need to figure out. API design is really, really hard, and like there are not many people that get that right. So a few things that we need to figure out is like framing, like the idea that if you create a content management system, you might want to be able to choose if you want just the core content or everything that's currently displayed on the Plone side, right? You don't want with HTTP 1. You don't want to have like 20 requests, right? To just render one page. You want to have that in like one request, right? So that's framing. Then getting actions right, what you can do, that's related to hypermedia, right? So that if you have a JSON response, that it basically tells you what you can do with that content within the API. And also like schemas are quite hard to get that right with all the functionality that we currently have in Plone with like behaviors, with field sets and all that kind of stuff. So the basics are in place, but that's complex. So we're still working on that. Yeah, a lot of companies are already using Plone REST API in production. For Teamworks, who really considerably contributed to Plone REST API, they even made Plone REST API work with archetypes. We never planned that, but now we have it. We have archetypes and dexterity, so you can use Plone REST API with Plone 4 and archetypes, and you can use it with Plone 5 and dexterity and like everything in between, right? Which might be nice if you have a like legacy application and you want to build something really new and really fancy on top of that. You can do that. As I said, Plone REST, I consider that stable. I guess if we could make a final release at some point and also plib it and include it in Plone 5.x, whatever. A Plone REST API will like take a bit more time because we can before we can consider it like to be really stable, right? But I would invite everybody to like to get involved in that, right? We're really open to contributions. So please start to use it today. This is on both packages are on PyPy, right? So Plone REST and Plone REST API. We have documentation for both packages. I hope the documentation is all right. You can always put more effort into documentation, but as Ramon said, it's not easy to reuse the like documentation and testing tools that are around because they all don't know about like traversal, right? So we have to build our own stuff. Yeah, that's about it. I hope I gave you like a first impression about what you can do with Plone REST API. I plan to sprint on that. So if you want to get into like modern JavaScript development, like be it React or Angular or whatever, Meteor, whatever you like, feel free to like start hacking on Plone REST API. Tell us what you think is missing, and that's about it. Thank you.